And over to you, Tim, to take us through.
Thank you, Toastmaster of the evening. My question for you this evening, as Neil has alluded to, is where is Tuva? And as per what I've said in the chat, this is an interactive speech. So if you can follow the following process just to work out where Tuva is, go to the Padlet I've just posted in the chat, zoom out from it, click the pink button just up there, and go to option 2 for add a map pin, then take a guess. And we'll allow 30 seconds for you guys to do that. If you haven't already, thank you for those who have. Okay, about 15 more seconds. If you can't get Padlet to work, then don't worry, just post it in the chat. But let me know either way. A couple of you have guessed already. And if you still haven't had time, then carry on doing that and we'll continue with the speech. Now, most people's first guess is, as you see on this map, over there on the right, in the Pacific. And you'd be thinking of Tuvalu. But Tuva is not the same as Tuvalu, and Tuva is not in the Pacific. When you suggest people that Tuva was independent from 1921 till 1944, most people suggest somewhere in Eastern Europe. Indeed, one or two of you have already. But Tuva isn't in Europe at all. And if you mention Tuvan polyphonic throat singing, then people will guess just about everywhere, but none of these answers on screen are correct. I will go back to this at the end of the presentation though. Now, just want to introduce you to Richard Feynman, who is the second greatest physicist of the 20th century. And the thing you should know about Richard Feynman is that he is sub-zero cool. He's also brighter than the sun. What I mean by that is he was behind the Manhattan Project in World War II, which created the atom bomb. And a couple of other things he's famous for. He's famous for creating Feynman diagrams, which he won a Nobel Prize for. They're still actively in use in physics. I'm sure Colin can fill you in on more detail on that. And there was the Challenger disaster, which in all candor was probably the thing he's most famous for. If you haven't heard of the Challenger disaster, it happened in the late 80s. It was a shuttle went up and exploded. And if you see on the right, Richard Feynman is explaining to Congress why that happened and got the right answer. But few people know what happened to him next. His last great quest was to visit Tuva. And you'll notice I've used a slightly different spelling. This is the genuine spelling, T-U-V-A. The reason I put T-O-O-V-A is when I practice this speech, people have just Googled it. So that's to add a bit more mystery, but again, we'll cover that at the end of the speech where you think it is. Now, why Tuva? Why did Richard Feynman want to go to Tuva? And I want to do a brief explanation of that right now, which is, if you imagine a chessboard, on a chessboard, you have the various pieces doing various moves. So you have the bishop goes diagonally, the rook goes backwards and forwards, and pawns do as well. But then the thing that someone like Richard Feynman would be fascinated by is something like castling, which is where the rook and the king swap positions. Those are the sort of patterns he would look for within the universe as his obsession, because he was really into not just the patterns, but the things that break the patterns, the things that are unusual. And this brings us to polyphonic throat singing. I imagine all the songs you've heard, all the music you've heard tends to have one tone at a time. The tone would go like, if I start ahead, go like this generally, or it could vary over time. But with what Tuvan polyphonic throat singing is instead of just one tone at a time, or if you imagine they can vary the tone, but just one tone at a time, with polyphonic throat singing, the singer can do two tones at a time, and what's more, vary them. So it's very unusual. And what I'd like to do is show you a video of how this works, because it's hard to explain, but if I show you this video, then it will explain one of the reasons he wanted to go to Tuva. Now, you might have seen with that video, or heard rather, it sounds like two people are singing, because there's this whistling tone up here at the same time as a humming tone, and it's actually one person singing. That's what Tuvan polyphonic throat singing is those two tones at once, and hence the mystery of him wanting to go there. Now, moving on to this next slide, the second reason he wanted to go was for their bizarre stamps. You see this triangular stamp, which I imagine you've never seen a triangular stamp. I certainly never have, but that was one thing that was a feature of Tuva. The third reason was for the epic adventure. Less than a handful of people had been to Tuva in Richard Feynman's time, because it was very remote and very restricted. Now, to get the visa to go there, Richard Feynman in the late 80s applied to the government of the USSR. They said no. He asked again, nicely, using all his wit and charm. They again said no. He asked again, and bear in mind this is sub-zero cool Richard Feynman, he really pulled out all the stops for this. They thought about it this time and said, yes. But there was just one problem, and this is rather a sticky problem, which is that he unfortunately died 3 weeks before the visa came through. However, the reason we know about this story is his friend Ralph Layton wrote this book, Tuva or Bust, about his adventure to Tuva. And as a final closing thought, I imagine you're thinking, where is Tuva? And Tuva is, drum roll, yours to find. And at this point, I will go back to the, briefly, I know I'm over time, briefly go back to the Padlet, and one person got very near with Kazakhstan, someone got near with Japan, Philippines, but I'm afraid none of you have got it. As a closing thought, please go and find out where Tuva is. Thank you very much.